Thank you, Cesar. So it's a pleasure to be here presenting this study that we conducted last year, and it is about investigating the role of gilts as a factor for delayed time to stability. That's the question that we wanted to assess in this study. So this is a work that we did with Carles and Cesar during most of 2018. So just as a bit of background, in terms of processing fluids, that is the tool that we used in this study to assess PRRS in time in our question about the role of gilts. And this sample is being used very often these days to assess PRRS status. And there are a couple of publications out there, all of them highlighting the role that this tool has for monitoring PRRS. So a couple of presentations from our friends in Iowa, Giovanni and Will, that are out there. And also the one that Carles also published, tried assessing the sensitivity and specificity of this tool to relate towards the PRRS status in the litter. So it appears to be a highly sensitive and specific sample to assess PRRS status. Also, one concern that was with this sample is the level of aggregation. You know, we pull these litters together, and we may lose some sensitivity there to detect the virus if it is present. What Carles and us have seen lately is that there is a good potential you can aggregate a fair number of liters and still be able to detect the virus in this aggregated sample, particularly if the CT value is low. For example, for CT values that are less than 30, you can do a fair amount of aggregation in terms of liters, and I put a number there up to 100, but it will depend on the CT value of the sample that is positive in this aggregated sample. But when the CT values start being above 30, then we start losing some sensitivity, and it makes sense to reduce the number of liters that we are putting together in our pool. And I put a number there, 10 to 20 liters, to start opening the pool, and so we don't miss positive samples in our aggregation. So the motivation for this study that we conducted, it was mainly some associations that we saw in Carles' paper, and also going back in the PhD thesis of Jean-Paul, that report an association between low parity liters and PRRS positivity. So that's the question that we wanted to assess and see really if that was happening in this study. So as our main objective, we wanted to assess the role of Parity, especially Parity 1 liters, in maintaining PRRS virus in sow herds. In our design, we decided to collect weekly samples of 15 Parity 1 liters, 15 Parity 2, and 15 Parity 3 and plus. And in every week in several sow herds. So for our farm selection, we started looking for participant farms between March and June of 2018, and started asking for participation and enrolling farms, mostly in participants of the MSHIM project. And we wanted to enroll herds that had a recent PRRS outbreak, and we defined kind of a time frame there between 10 and 20 weeks from the outbreak. And this is not any random selection or anything, we just asked for participation and got the herds and the people that wanted to be part of the study. And so we asked them to collect the tails and testicles after processing in a weekly basis until stability was achieved. Stability in terms, we didn't know quite well what we were going to find here because we are monitoring using processing fluids, and we don't have a well-defined standards nowadays to say when stability is going to occur. So we were kind of blind there, but we say, well, we will go until people feel comfortable that they have reached stability according to this monitoring tool. And also, or when we run out of money, which also happened. So we asked them to collect all the tissues from a single liter and place them into a Ziploc bag. So 1 Ziploc bag per liter. And in the farm, as a routine task, we didn't go to the farm. The farm personnel was the one in charge of collecting all samples, and as they do normally in their operations. The samples were kept frozen in the farm once collected, and they were sent frozen to us overnight, 1 or 2 weeks after collection. So at arrival, the individual we were receiving these individual liter samples in a Ziploc bag, and we were doing the aggregation in the lab, just opening the bag and putting them into a larger bag in this fashion. So we ended up with a big bag containing the 15 liters. Then we waited with these samples at room temperature until they were ready for the fluid collection. We extracted this liquid and put it into Falcon tubes. And we extracted around 10 ml. Prior to this collection, we tried to ensure that this was kind of a mixed fluid, so we did a bit of shaking and getting the fluid and putting it into these Falcon tubes. So, and then send them to the PCR test at the VDL at the University of Minnesota. So for each week and each herd, we will obtain 3 PCR results, one for Parity 1, one for the Parity 2, and another one for the Parity 3+. In terms of the herds that we enrolled, we have these 10 herds. We named them here from A to J, and they belong to 5 different systems. And some of them were quite advanced in the time from the outbreak. Some of them were 5 months into the outbreak. Some of them broke in around January, and we enrolled them in March, so kind of 3 months after the outbreak. We have different statuses here in these farms. We have 5 farms that when they broke, they were in naive status, and some others that were vaccinating, that were stable and vaccinating, or others that were stable and not vaccinated. Some farms also were closed, and some others were open and entering gilts normally. So, also, I want to highlight this farm that was enrolled and was lost to follow-up, and they didn't want to continue in the trial. They contributed to a couple of weeks, but then they dropped from the study. So from here on, we're going to mainly relate results to 9 farms, not to 10 farms. So we have these 9 farms that were sampled weekly from March 2018 to February 19. And during this period of time, we collected around 2,000 liters samples, which were aggregated into 158 aggregated samples per Parity. And all of them were PCR tested. Overall, we observed that 28.7% of the samples were PCR positive. And when we did just the stratification by Parity group, we observed that there was some differences in the point estimate, but when you see here the confidence intervals, they are quite broad and overlapping between these parity groups. So we started immediately seeing that there may be no really a difference here between the parity groups. In terms of the CT values, also here we have just the overall CT value in each of these 3 parity groups, and they look very similar, and when we assess them statistically, also we see that there is no significant difference, even if you start assessing them in different chunks period of time during the break. In this slide is just to show you the overall results that we got here. We have the hertz here from A to J, and each of them represent the parity 1, parity 2, and parity 3 in that hertz. And on top we have the time from the outbreak, going from some herds that were enrolled at 7 weeks after the outbreak, or some others that were enrolled around 20 weeks after the outbreak. So for example, herd A was enrolled 21 weeks after the outbreak, and we have here in red the positive results and in blue the negative results at the PCR. And visually you can start seeing that there is a lot of things going on, and positive results, and not necessarily related to the parity group that they belong to. Also some spaces here of continuously negative results, sometimes up to 9 weeks, followed by a positive result. In this herd that I want to highlight here are herds E, F, G, and J. Those are the ones that achieve stability during the follow-up period, and were the only ones. All the rest were still working towards stability when we stopped following them. When we started this study, we were expecting to see something like this. So this is just one herd that we observe, really something that we can say, maybe here we can see an effect of parity 1 liters being positive longer in time than compared to the other parity groups. But it was only one herd in our set of 9 farms. So in terms of stability, and when they felt secure to open the farm and entering replacements, this was only achieved in 4 out of the 9 farms during the follow-up period. And the number of negative weeks that we had before they entered gilts into the herd was around 10 weeks in farm E, 13 weeks in farm F and G, and 14 weeks in farm J. Another measurement that we tried to get here was the time from the outbreak to having at least 10 negative consecutive results weekly. And this time in these farms that achieve stability was 33 weeks, 38, 39, and 48 weeks in farm E. However, we have also remaining 5 farms that were still working towards stability after 52 weeks from the PRRS outbreak. Another measurement that we have here is the time between 2 positive results in processing fluids. And these are the most frustrating cases in which we sometimes had 9 or 8 weeks of consecutive negative results followed by a positive result. And that's some farms, for example, this farm H was having very few positives in time, and we were expecting them to be stable in time, but at the end they got a positive again. So, and this graph is just to show you the same thing, but in proportions, just comparing the proportion of positive PCR result in the different parity groups. Don't pay too much attention to the tails of this distribution, because then we have very few data, and sometimes we can go above the 1 or the 100% there. But just overall, we see that the parity 1 started with a kind of lower proportion of positive results compared to the other two parity groups, but then in time this trend kind of reversed in the point estimate. But when we see the confidence intervals of these proportions, they are totally overlapping, and this difference may be just due to chance. The same result again, just this one coming out of a model that we built, trying to take into account the farm effect, the fact that we were sampling herds in time, also the closure and everything, and try to come up with the adjusted proportion for these parity groups. But at the end, we still observe the same thing that we've been seeing from the beginning, that really we see a difference in the point estimate, but still we have these confidence intervals that are overlapping, and we cannot say that there is a significant difference between the parity groups. I wanted to show you also this part in which we also sample. Whenever they send us these individual liter samples, we store the individual liter in a cryogenic vial, and then we decided to test these individual liter results in 3 herds. And so we ended up testing this amount of liters, that are around 600 liters, in different monthly sampling times, just to see how well, to learn a little bit of how many positive liters there were when you have a positive aggregated sample, and also how well they were correlating between the aggregated sample and the individual liter result. So in terms of the number of positive liters that there were within a positive aggregated sample, we see that most of the time there's going to be just 1 liter or 2 liters or 3 liters in our aggregated sample of 15 liters that are positive. And even the largest amount of positive liters that we have in this aggregated sample was 6. So oftentimes you see very few liters that are positive within this aggregated sample. And perhaps also within the liter, there may be very few peaks that are positive. The CT values, for example, for this, when we observe just 1 liter positive within our aggregated sample, 15 liters, were around 30. So, and we were able to detect those CT values in our aggregated sample. Here, just to show you how these results agree, the aggregated sample with the individual sample. And so in the first column we have 22, so we have 22 results that there was at least 1 liter positive, and we were able to detect them in the aggregated sample. Also we have, whenever the individual samples were negative, we also have a negative aggregated sample, except for 1 that of course has to be there, that I just blame myself and my inability to do a good job in the lab, and maybe just cross-contamination. So in summary of this result, this study, I would say that processing fluids continue to prove their value as a monitoring tool for PRRS in breeding herds, but we didn't see here any significant evidence of parity playing an influential role in maintaining PRRS virus in the herd. However, we did observe this effect in 1 out of the 9 herds that we follow, but we don't know really how representative is this from the population of herds, and if that is the proportion that this occurs also in the field. just before closing, I wanted to invite you, or any person that is working with a positive herd and they are thinking to use processing fluids to monitor. We want to learn a little bit more of how processing fluids are being used by the industry in terms of the number of liters that are being aggregated, the frequency of testing, and also learning about in terms of the positive results that are getting in time and the time to negative processing fluids. So it's just a matter of trying to learn more about how this tool is being used and how to better interpret the results. And so for this study, we are paying for the PCR results, PCR tests. And so if anybody is keen in participating, just let me know, and we'll be happy to have you. So I want to finish this with acknowledging the vets, producer, and farm workers that helped me in this study. Without them, it would have been impossible to generate these results. Also a bunch of people that helped me in the lab, Monse, Carly, me, Angie, Jorge, Gustavo, and Aaron. And also to the Swine Health Information Center and Beringer, the funder of this study. Thank you.
Any questions for Juan? There's some microphones there. Oh.
Hi, Juan. Did you see any difference between the kind of time to negative, how many weeks it took, and the strain? Did you look at that?
Sorry, in the what, Tara?
So the weeks or time it took to get a negative or consecutive negative samples, your 10 negative samples in a row. Did you look at some of the farms were a really long time? Was there any connection between the strain on those farms?
No, I haven't looked at that. I have some of the RFLP patterns there, and I will have to assess that, but I'm afraid that with 9 herds, it's going to be quite difficult to say something there.
Not enough.
Yeah.
We have time for one more question.
Nice presentation, Juan. I'm curious, maybe you said it, but maybe I missed it. The aggregation of the liters whereby the 3 samples from the 3 parity groups per each week, so I aggregate all the liters in that way, or I think I missed that point.
By parity group. So if all the P1s were together, all the P2s together, and the P3 together in a week, but okay. Not mixing groups, right? Just P1s, P2, and P3s.
And you did it from different runs also, or they were all from the same run?
No, it could be from the same room, could be different rooms. Okay. We didn't have any influence on that. I mean, it was just the way that they were collecting the samples in their normal operation.
Okay.
Yeah.
Gracias.